I'm back! For those of you who don't know me, my name's Annie, and for those of you who are coming back to see how to upgrade an H501A, welcome back again. Today I'm going to be showing you how exactly to upgrade a drone with no transmitter. This might be new to some of you H501S users. If you're watching this way in the future and think, well, this is old news, you might still want to watch the video anyway because I do include some very useful tidbits of information. In any case, the first question I'd like to ask you, newcomers or not, is this. Why are you trying to upgrade? Don't fix what ain't broke. If your drone is working, functioning fine, then we would recommend that you don't upgrade at all. If you are a newcomer and you just got your unit and you've never even flown it before and you're like, oh, Woody, I'm just gonna go and upgrade my drone because the newer it is, the better it is. Again, not necessarily true. Go and fly your unit first. Go and enjoy it. If it works well, we recommend that you just don't upgrade, okay? But if you are unsure, give us an email, service@hubsan.com. We can help you troubleshoot an issue you're having or just to answer any sort of questions you have about the upgrade in general. Or you can leave a comment down below and one of our reps will be able to get to you. Alrighty? If you already know that you need to upgrade either to gain a new function from the newest firmware upgrade or it has already been determined by our reps at service@hubsan.com that you do need an upgrade, just follow the video as follows. Okay? So let's get started. The first step to any firmware upgrade is to check your stock firmware version. That is, if you can. If you don't know your stock firmware version, that's okay. But for newcomers who are watching this video, or for anyone who has never ever looked at the stock firmware before, we highly recommend this step. So if you would zoom in on the phone for me, please. I have everything set up for you guys right here. What you want to do if you want to check your stock firmware version is you want to tap that cog on the upper right hand corner. Then you're going to tap the Others tab here and scroll over to the flight control software version. So now we have the flight control, also abbreviated as FC right here. In this case, my drone is 1.1.36 off default. And my default RX or receiver firmware is 1.1.23. Something very important to note, and I can guarantee you it's extremely obvious when it comes to this particular model. Since the H501A does not have a transmitter, you can finally surmise that an RX or a receiver is not your transmitter or remote control. The RX is the drone's motherboard. Again, the primary electrical oomph that allows the drone to fly. Very important. In any case, you are going to want to take note of this and make sure that you don't mix this up with a transmitter or remote control firmware version. If you do, you're gonna break your quad. If you're looking at the FC over here, keep in mind that your flight control controls everything in terms of flight functionality. So GPS functions, altitude, the barometer is located on the flight control module, everyone. It's going to be, any sort of flight capability is going to be controlled by the flight control firmware. So yeah, those are your two basic firmware versions. Again, these are only two different components. If you only need to upgrade one, just upgrade one of those. You don't need to touch the other one. If you need to or want to upgrade both, by all means do so. Don't panic if you only receive one part of the firmware from either our service@hubsan.com site or email or from our main website at www.hubsan.com. Just make sure you know which part or indeed parts you need to upgrade and make sure that you have the corresponding firmware for the part of firmware in question that you want to flash. So yeah, write down the stock firmware information. It's very important. If anything happens and you need to use, and we ask, or you need to use the stock firmware in order to determine what type of firmware you need, or if we ask you for it once you email us at service@hubsan.com, very important. Do take this down, and then put it somewhere safe. So yeah, once you have that done, I'm gonna unplug this and turn the cell phone off. We can finally proceed to how to upgrade with firmware. So over to the computer we go. First piece of advice I'd like to give everyone is to basically download and store your firmware somewhere accessible. In this case, I've chosen my desktop. This is the H501A firmware folder that I'm going to be using today. Part of it is in Chinese, but I think the H501A makes it perfectly clear that it's an H501A firmware bundle. In this case, we're going to enter it, and I'm going to point out several things to you. Notice that we have both an FC/flight control and an RX/receiver firmware piece in here. If you don't get this, again, don't panic. If the one that you do not, or if the one that you need is not here, then give us an email. If you have different firmware versions than is shown here on the computer, do not worry. As long as if you are upgrading for flight control, you have an FC before your firmware version, as well as ascertain that it's for the 501A. Or if you're trying to upgrade your receiver or RX and you've ascertained that you have an RX in front of the firmware version, then you are okay. So in this case, we're going to first upgrade your flight control. So we're going to double click and enter. And now we're going to enter the upgrade tool. Notice on the bottom left-hand corner there is a connection status indicator, as well as the FC program and the RX program sections. We're going to use the first one first. But before that, I want to show you guys what you need for both firmware upgrades. You're going to need a micro USB cord. For those of you who are Android users, you can just use your phone charging cord, assuming it has a USB adapter. Very important, because we're going to need to plug the USB to the computer, take the micro USB end, and then plug it to that little socket that you see in the rear of the drone. Plug her in. Oops, wrong side. Might be a little tricky. I've done this forever. She still gives me problems, so don't fret if she fights you. Come on. Come on. There we go. So if you hear that sound, perfect. If you don't, that's okay. Just take a look at this. Right here, it'll tell you if it's connected or not. If it's connected, let's go ahead and open the file. Now, as you see, I didn't exactly land on the proper firmware version for flight control. Pay very close attention. If you don't, simply go to where you stored your firmware, in my case the desktop, and go and search for your flight control or FC firmware. Once you have found it, double click the .hbs firmware file. Now, click upgrade only once. If you click it more than once, you will run into errors. So I'm going to only click it once and let it go. And now we have our erase timeout. If it does that, don't worry. It's just the drone giving you a hard time. Just attempt it again. Again, click only once. And now we finally have the loading bar going. Once it hits 100, now it's going to jump to not connect for the flight control version. If that happens, don't worry. Wait till it says connect, and then click read version. In this case, we've reflashed the 1.1.36 firmware successfully, so it'll show up. If you haven't done it successfully, then it won't show up at all, and you'll have to repeat the process again. But in this case, we're successful. So hooray, we've completed the flight control firmware upgrade. Now, how to do a receiver or RX firmware upgrade. This is where it differs from the process that many of you guys are used to if you guys were 501S owners. First things first, you're going to want to detach it from the micro USB cord momentarily. Then you're going to take a battery, make sure it's at least halfway charged because you need some power for this. Connect your drone to its battery. I'm going to wait for it to do its dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Perfect. Once it does that, I'm going to plug the drone to the computer again with the micro USB. You hear it? Wait for it to say connect. Let's say connected. Then we're going to click open file. Again, I'm going to search for my firmware, but not really. This is why you got to keep your firmware nice and consolidated. Now, we're going to look for the RX emblem here next to the receiver firmware. Again, if you don't have this version number, perfectly fine. I'm talking to also H501SS users. If you're using an H501SS RX firmware upgrade for this process, Don't fret, just make sure there's an RX and an H501SS. If you are an SS owner watching this video, just click and enter. In this case, H501A RX, whatever version it is right there. Enter, and double click the HBS file. Now, again, click upgrade only once. And watch the bar go. Now, if we have Martin direct the camera, you notice the lights momentarily, they're just flashing here very, very rapidly. I think you only got a glimpse of it. That means that the unit is upgrading. It's going to basically, you saw the lights come on solid and then these flash a little slowly, and then it's going to go back into this sort of compass calibration LED flash sequence. Once it does that, we're going to come back over here to the computer and click read version. And it says version 1.1.23, which means you upgraded successfully. If you do this and it still says your original RX version, what you can do is you can detach the drone from the computer, disconnect it from its battery, reconnect, wait for the dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Okay, wait for that. Reconnect to the computer, and then when the tool says connected, try the read version again. If it still says your old firmware version, not to fret, just repeat the process that we did last time for the receiver or RX. But if it reads the version like how we did last time, we see that the version of the firmware has been upgraded to the version that you had been wanting to upgrade to, then you've done it. You're good. And you're perfectly done and set in this case. So I'm going to detach everything and bring around. Alrighty, so if you just finished what we shown you right there, then congratulations, you're done with whatever firmware version upgrade you were trying to do. Flight control or receiver, or maybe both. If you made it here, congratulations. Now, if you have any questions about maybe what the newest firmware does, again, or if you have any questions because you're still having problems after the upgrade and you're not sure where you went wrong, leave us a comment down below this video, or you can give us an email at service@hubsan.com. Once again, this has been Annie from the Hubsan Los Angeles Technical Support Office. Hope you had a good time with this video, got some information in, and we'll see you next time.